I'd like to just continue where I left off with, so to speak, at the risk of being boring, the timeline. I said in 1970 there were atrocities committed in Gaza against the people of Gaza by the headed by the agricultural minister at the time, Ariel Sharon. In 1987, as you perhaps remember, Piers, the first Intifada broke out. It was overwhelmingly, here I quote Benny Morris from his book Righteous Victims, it was an overwhelmingly nonviolent civil resistance to the Israeli occupation. By 1990, 3 years after the beginning, or really 2 years, because it began on December 7, 1987, by 1990, Israel started to institute, again, I'm sticking strictly to Gaza, what it called a closure policy. And the closure policy was basically to seal off Gaza, okay? By 2002, 2003, if you read Baruch Kimmerling, he was a senior sociologist at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He described Gaza as, quote, the largest concentration camp ever. Now, you might say Baruch Kimmerling was a person of the left, and I will grant that. But then we have Giora Eiland. Giora Eiland at the time was the head of Israel's National Security Council. He said in March 2003, and now I'm quoting him, he described Gaza as a huge concentration camp. So you can say there is a consensus among knowledgeable people, sociologists at the Hebrew University, head of the National Security Council, that Israel had turned Gaza into a concentration camp. In 2006, there is an election in January 2006. Hamas wins the election basically on the platform of reform, because the Palestinian Authority is proverbially corrupt. It comes into power. Immediately as it comes into power, Israel institutes this brutal economic blockade on Gaza. And at that point, there have been various descriptions. I'm sure, Piers, you wouldn't disagree. You wouldn't call The Economist a left-wing magazine or anti-Semitic. It described Gaza as, quote, a toxic dump. And at that point, it had slowly, just to give you one example, Piers, and your listeners, because they should have a sense of what this blockade looked like. Israel's explicit policy was to keep Gaza on the precipice of economic catastrophe. That's how they described their policy. They prohibited baby chicks from entering Gaza. They prohibited chocolate from entering Gaza. They prohibited potato chips from entering Gaza. They prohibited any spices from entering Gaza. And it prohibited any exports from Gaza, except at some points, occasionally, things like strawberries. So what had happened to Gaza? It had, on the eve of 2007, it had the highest unemployment rate in the world. It was about 60% unemployed, 50% for the population as a whole, 60% for youth. The people in Gaza were left to languish and die, no past, no present, no future, to languish and die in the concentration camp. That was their prospect as of October 6, 2003. Excuse me. Yeah, 2023. Sorry about that.
It's Hamas that turned it into a toxic place. When Israel, in fact, actually occupied it, it was in much better shape than when Hamas took it over. And so it's Hamas's fault. Hamas turned Gaza into this horrible place. Yes, Gaza was a terrible place, completely the fault of Hamas.
Can we reach a point of agreement on the issue of settlements? I suspect we can. So Norman Finkelstein, I don't want to keep responding. I don't want you to keep responding to each other about that. What I would like you to do.
One sentence.
Well, listen,
allow me.
Okay, give me one sentence, but then please address the issue of settlements.
One sentence. the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, 1,000 humanitarian and economic organizations have all reached the same conclusion. It's very simple. The main cause of the disaster in Gaza is Israel's illegal blockade of that parcel of land. Full stop.
That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's false.
Who's wrong? Who's wrong? UNCTAD is
That's
wrong.
false.
The World Bank is wrong.
Blockade,
The International Monetary Fund is wrong. They're all wrong.
Yes.
Are they all anti-Semitic?
Yes,
is that what's going on?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. They're wrong. I happen to know
So
more
why
about
are they
the
all
law
wrong?
than any of them. Because the blockade was completely lawful. It was designed to prevent the importation and then the use of rockets against Israel. It's perfectly lawful for a country to engage in a blockade. That is, you're not, let me finish. You can't have a Look, the military occupation was lawful. The blockade was lawful. Every country has the right to defend itself from rockets, from terror tunnels, from people coming over the border, murdering and kidnapping people. Those are all lawful. I'm telling you that as an expert in international law and the law of war. If you want to dispute me, get an expert who knows something about international law. Not a polemicist like
Professor Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, just as a matter of fact, I teach the laws of war. I've been teaching it for the last 5 years. To my understanding,
you're biased.
Professor Dershowitz. Professor Dershowitz, let's agree. I'm completely ignorant. Let's take that as a point of departure. How does it come to be that every humanitarian and political body in the world has declared that the blockade of Gaza constitutes collective punishment and therefore is a violation, a breach of international law, a war crime under international law? How did that come to pass?
They're wrong.
How is it that
first of all, you're wrong.
They're all wrong.
No, you're not.
They're all
you're not
wrong,
right.
Except
you're
Alan
not right.
Dershowitz.
No.
Except
you're wrong.
Sir,
you're wrong in describing.
Professor Dershowitz.
You're wrong in describing every group. There are many
name
groups.
Me one. Professor Dershowitz, name me one legal international legal body or human rights organization. Name me one. I'll take the pause. Name me one that says the blockade of Gaza is not collective punishment. Name me one.
The Lawfare Project in the United States.
The Lawfare Project. I said, name me one international legal or political body.
It is.
One.
It is.
Everybody's listening now.
Legal body.
Piers Morgan has a very large audience. Name me one. Name me one international or legal or political body that says the blockade of Gaza is legal. Name me one.
It is legal, and every organization that I have been associated with, the Lawfare Project, the project run by a woman named Leitner, an international project, were all concluded that the blockade is legal.
Also, the Israeli Supreme